And to the angel of the church of Thyatira write, These say the Son of God, who hath eyes like unto a flame of fire, and feet are like fine brass. I know thy works, and charity, and service, and faith, and thy patience, and thy works, and the last to be more than the first. Notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which call herself a prophet, to teach and to seduce my servants into fornication, and to eat fruits, to eat things sacrificed unto idols. I gave her space to repent of her fornication, and she repented not. Behold, I will cast her into a bed, and them that commit adultery with her into great tribulation, except thy repent of thy deeds. I will kill her children with death, and all the churches shall know that I am the one which searches the reins of the hearts, and I will give unto everyone according to your works. But unto you I say, and unto the rest of Thyatira, as many as not this doctrine, and which have not known the depths of Satan, as they speak, I will put upon you none other burden, but that which ye hath already hold fast till I come. And he that overcomes, I will keep my works. He that overcomes and keepeth my works unto the end, to him power I will give over the nations, and I will rule them with an iron rod, as a vessel of a potter shall they break to shivers, even as I receive of my Father, and I will give him the morning star, and he that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Now we're in the second half of the seven churches. Like I mentioned when we started talking about Ephesus, is that the first three churches seem to not have an explicit reference to the second coming, whereas the last four churches have an explicit reference to the second coming, where you have in the church of Thyatira, Jesus is talking about the great tribulation. And so because Jesus is talking about the great tribulation, from this moment on, you realize that these churches are going to last up until the second coming in one way or the other, or the end times in one way or the other. Whereas the first three were going to cease at some point, where you had Ephesus fading away, then Smyrna fading away, then Pergamos fading away. Now the church went from its apostolic nature to it receiving persecution first by the Jews, then by the Romans, to it then being aligned to the Romans, to it being mixed into the Romans, where Roman infiltration has entered the church, so much so that there is no difference between the church and the pagan practices that follow up. And so here you realize, you look at how God is moving, Jesus is moving. He talks about in Smyrna, he talks about them being in the synagogue of Satan, and them being persecuted in the synagogue of Satan. And then he talks about the seat of Satan, and the seat of Satan starts filtering into the church. He talks about the people who have not known the depth of Satan. And so now the church at Thyatira has moved to the seat of Satan has now evolved into knowing the depths of Satan. And he talks about Jezebel as a prominent figure in the church of Thyatira, and we're going to understand why Jezebel is such a prominent figure in the Church of Thyatira. So let's talk about the history of Thyatira. Originally a Lydian town bearing the name of Pelopia, then it was called Semiramis. For those who know, know why that name is significant. Semiramis being the queen of heaven, Nimrod's wife, Tammuz's mother, and all the pagan stuff that we talked about when talking about Pergamos. Then it was called Euhippia, and it was taken by the Persians. Later, Alexander ultimately landing in possession, and later after the Persians, it goes to Alexander, and then ultimately lands into one of his generals as Alexander's empire was divided into four. It was with Lysimachus, pronounced, I know I've butchered that. In 301 BC, Lysimachus was defeated by Seleucus I, or Nicator, and this became part of Syria. Nicator named it Thyatira, in Greek thygater, which means for daughter, on being informed that he had a daughter. So he conquered the city and then named it after his daughter, or in celebration of having a daughter. The significance comes from the name Semiramis, as we recall the history of the Babylonian religion. Like I said earlier, Jezebel being the queen of heaven, and Jezebel was the daughter of Eth-Baal, king of Sidon, and the priest of Astarte. He murdered Pheles, his predecessor, to seize the throne, and she married Ahab to seal a profitable alliance. Now, this goes back to why Solomon married 1,000 women. The reason why was to build alliances with the nations that he married into, because you do not fight your in-laws unless you're a very special in-law. But yeah, so in the old days, marriage was seen as a strategic move towards is to have an alliance, but also to make peace. If you have enemies, you make peace through marriages, through strategic marriages. And Jezebel's marriage to Ahab is one of this, and so it formed an alliance between Israel and Phoenicia. She sought to exterminate the prophets of Yahweh, YHWH, the Tetragrammaton, the YHWH, the God of Israel. She and Ahab, through Baal worship and Astarte worship, ushered in the worst period in the Old Testament. Let's just turn our Bibles to 1 Kings 18:17 to 40. And it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah, and Ahab said unto him, Art thou he that troubleth Israel? And he answered, I trouble not. I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, in that ye have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and thou hast followed Baalim. That's the plural form for Baal. You understand, in Hebrew, any word that has I am in it is a plural. You have seraph, seraphim, cherub, cherubim. Elohim shows you the plurality of who God is. Baalim. Now therefore send and gather to me all the men of Israel unto Mount Carmel, and the prophets of 450, and the prophets of the grove 400, which eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent unto all the children of Israel, and gathered all the prophets together unto Mount Carmel. And Elijah came unto all the people, and said, How long hath he between two opinions? If the Lord be God, follow him, or if Yahweh be God, follow him, and if Baal, then follow him. And the people answered not a word. And this is honestly something that I feel, I respect people who would tell you what they believe and who practice out what they believe, because you know that you're not dealing with somebody who is double-minded. Obviously, it would be nice that everybody comes to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, but then that should be a conclusion that you come to on your own. Obviously, you can't really come to conclusions on your own, because everybody has somebody to everybody has someone that introduced them to the Lord, or something external that introduced them to the Lord. Paul says, how can the people hear if there's nobody to preach? And so you realize that you rea- you realize that you come to God because of something external, obviously, but then you also need to come to that conclusion on your own. Nobody should force you into that conclusion. If you believe that Jesus is Lord, serve Jesus. If you believe that Allah is God, save serve Allah. If you believe Buddha or whomever is God, serve that God. But then you should be able to come to a conclusion. Peter tells us that we should always be able to defend our faith. There should always be a why you came to the Lord. Or rather, there's always that one thing that brought you to the Lord. If it is because it's your parents' religion and it was their parents' religion, that is building your house on very, very faulty ground, because you have not come to the reality of who God is. But now, in this situation with Elijah and the prophets of Baal, it is now talking about who is. It's now coming to the reality of the situation as to who the one true living God is. That's why blasphemy of the Spirit is unforgivable, because you have seen the reality of God, but you reject his saving power. And going all the way back to Pharaoh, when you realize that God hardened his heart, it was because Pharaoh himself had hardened his heart already to the Israelites, and God ultimately gave him his wish. Same thing after Jesus talks about blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. After that, you look at from Matthew 13 going forward, Jesus speaks to the public exclusively in parables, and even his disciples get baffled, and they ask him, saying, why do you speak to these people in parables? Why don't you speak to them plainly like you do us? And he says that because the spirit is not for, the kingdom is not for them to know. If they answered without a word. Then Elijah unto the prophet and to the people, I, even I, only remain a prophet of the Lord, but Baal has 450 men. Let them therefore give us 2 bullocks, and let them choose 1 bullock for themselves, and cut it in pieces, and lay it on the wood, and not fire under. And I will dress the bullock, and I will lay it on wood, and put no fire under. And call ye the name of your gods, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the Lord God will answer, and the God that answers by fire, let him be God. And all the people answered and said, it is well spoken. And Elijah said unto the prophets of Baal, choose you 1 bullock for yourself, and dress it first, for ye are many, and call on the name of your gods, but put no fire under. And they took the bullocks which was given to them, and they dressed it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, hear us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they said, and they leaped upon the altar which was made. And it came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, cry louder, for he is a god. Either he's talking, or he's pursuing, or he's on a journey. Peradventure he sleepeth and must be awakened. And they cried aloud and started to cut themselves after the manner with knives and latchets. Now this is extreme. This is now getting extreme, is that their God is not answering, and so they start to cut themselves to try and get his attention, till blood gushed out upon them. And it came to pass, when it was midday, that the prophets, unto the time of the offering of the evening, that there was no voice, no answer, and nor any that regarded. And Elijah said unto all the people, come near unto me. And all the people came near unto him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, and was broken down. And Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, and to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Israel shall be my name. And the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench about an altar as great as would contain 2 measures of seed. And he put the wood in order, and cut the bullock in pieces, and laid him on the wood, and said, Fill 4 barrels with water, and pour it on the burnt sacrifice on the wood. He said, Do it a second time, and they did it a second time. He said, Do it a third time, and they did it a third time. And the water ran round about the altar, and he filled the trench also with water. It came to pass that at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Lord of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Israel, let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done the things at thy word. Hear me, O Lord, that this people may know that thou art the Lord God, and thou hast turned their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice and the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water that was trenched. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their face, and they said, The Lord is he that is God. The Lord is he that is God. And Elijah said, Take the prophets of Baal, let no one of them escape. And they took Elijah and brought him and drowned the brook. So here you have, so Elijah proves who God is. But since we're talking about Jezebel and we're making parallels to future events, it's kind of hard not to talk about a gentleman by the name of Naboth the Jezreelite, because it's actually going to foreshadow something that's going to happen in church history. And so if we can turn our Bibles to 1 Kings 21, 1 to 29. And it came to pass, there's a lot of Bible today, and it came to pass after these things that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard which was in Jezreel, and hard by the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, Give me thy vineyard, I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it's near my house, and I'll give for thee it a better vineyard than it, or if it seems good to thee, I'll give thee a worth of it in money. And Naboth said to Ahab, The Lord forbid it me that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee. And Ahab came into his house heavy and displeased because of the word that Naboth the Jezreelite had said unto him. For he had said, I will give thee the inheritance of my fathers. And he laid his face upon his bed, and turned away his face, and ate not bread. But Jezebel his wife came to him, and said unto him, Why is thy spirit sad, that thou eatest no bread? And he said unto her, Because I spake unto Naboth the Jezreelite, and he said unto me, Give me thy vineyard for money, or else if it please thee, I will give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give thee thy vineyard. And Jezebel his wife said unto him, Dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel, rather? Arise and eat bread, and let thy heart be merry. I will give you thy vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. So she wrote a letter in Ahab's name, and unto the elders and to the nobles that were in the city dwelling with Naboth. And she wrote the letter, saying, Proclaim a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people, and set 2 men of Beli before him, to bear witness against him, saying, He did blaspheme God and the king, and then carry him out and stone him that he may die. That's sad. And the men of the city, even the elders and the nobles who were in the inhabitants in the city, did as Jezebel had sent unto them, and as it was written in the letter which she had sent. They proclaimed a fast and set Naboth on a high among the people. And there came two men, children of Belial, and sat before him, and the two men of Belial witnessed against him and even against Naboth in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth did blaspheme God and the king. Then they carried him forth out of the city, and they stoned him with stones, and he died. Then he sent Jezebel, saying, Naboth is stoned and is dead. And it came to pass that Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned and was killed. That Jezebel said to Ahab, Arise and take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give thee for money. For Naboth is not alive, but is dead. And it came to pass that Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, that he rose up to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, to take possession of it. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Arise and meet Ahab of Israel, which is in Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth. This must have struck the anger of God for him to respond almost immediately. Whether he is gone down to possess it. And thou shalt speak unto him, saying, Thus saith the Lord, Hast thou killed and taken also possession? And thou speak upon saying, Thus saith the Lord, in the place where the dogs lick the blood of Naboth shall lick thy blood. In short, this is, you live by the sword, you die by the sword, even thine. And Ahab said to Elijah, Hast thou found me, O mine enemy? He answered, I have found thee because thou hast sold thyself to evil works in the sight of the Lord. Behold, I will bring evil upon thee, and I will take away thy prosperity, and I will cut off Ahab, him that pisseth against the wall. My favorite expression in the Bible is he that pisses against the wall. So what God is saying is that he's going to cut off Ahab and every single one of his male children. They that piss against the wall, men piss against walls. So the Bible literally is going as graphic as possible. Maybe this is Elijah putting spice on it, but Elijah says that God's going to cut off Ahab and they that piss against the wall, and Israel and him that is shut up in the nation of Israel. And I will make thy house like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah, for the provocation wherewith thou hast provoked me to anger, and made Israel to sin. And of Jezebel also spake the Lord, saying, The dogs shall eat Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. Now, just to back up, before going further, you realize that for Ahab to take possession of Naboth's vineyard, it means that not only was Naboth killed, but his successors or his sons were killed as well, because that was a land that was given as an inheritance. And so God, like I said, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. You kill an entire household, God will come and avenge that household. And here he's showing his vengeance. We often forget that God is a God of vengeance. Not only that, he says that where the dogs lick Naboth's wounds, they shall also lick Jezebel as well. And he says that this is how going to happen in Jezreel, or rather by the walls of Jezreel. Him that dieth of Ahab in the city shall eat, the dogs shall eat, and him that dieth in the field shall the fowls of the air eat. But there was none like Ahab, which did sell himself to the wickedness in the sight of the Lord, whom Jezebel his wife stirred up, and he did abominable in following idols according to all the things, as did the Amorites, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard these words, that he rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his flesh, and fasted and laid the sackcloth and went softly. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Seest thou how Ahab humbles himself before me? Because he humbled himself before me, I will not bring the evil in his days, but in his son's days, and I will bring the evil upon his house. So Naboth's vineyard, you realize that in the story that we read, you realize that Ahab wanted Naboth's vineyard. Naboth didn't want to give it, and so what was arranged was false witnesses were brought to condemn Naboth. They gave out accusations saying that he had blasphemed God and he had blasphemed the king. You realize that he ended up being executed, and then King Ahab seized his land. And later on, I'm going to explain why this is important. We can talk about the death of Jezebel that is found in 2 Kings 9:5 verse 37, but I think that's not important for the discussion today. Ultimately, you just realize that God says what he means, and he means what he says, and God says what he means, and he means what he says. This is just the story of Jehu, who rode into town, and Jezebel ended up falling from a great height, and her body went everywhere. So whenever God talks about, you caused my servants to commit fornication, he's talking about spiritual and chastity. He's talking about idolatry, because like I said, whenever you look at idolatry, especially in the book of Revelation, or rather when you look at adultery, especially in the book of Revelation, adultery always equals idolatry, because we're in a marriage with God. And so if we are worshiping other gods, it means that we are having extramarital relationships. And so when he says you cause my people, my servants, to fornicate, it means that you are taking their hearts to other idols. Same thing with the church at Pergamos. And so the application is that we should avoid pagan practices. Now let's talk about the prophetic implications. In 378 AD, Damascus took the office of Pontifex Maximus, which means high priest in Latin, of the Babylonian religion, which had previously been the prerogative of the Roman Empire, thus combining the Christian Church with the Roman Church. So we talk about the Pope. The word Pope comes from the word the word Papa, which means father. This initially applied to all Western bishops. They used to call them father or Pope or Papa. In 500 AD, it became restricted to the Bishop of Rome. For 500 years, the bishops of Rome were not popes. Also, it is believed that the popes get their succession from Peter, but then Peter, in 1 Peter 5 verse 3, did not want to have successors, and the talk comes from you and Peter Bar Jonah. I say unto you that on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail, and so on and so forth. They take that as Peter being the foundation of the church. In a sense, he was the foundation of the church, but then what Jesus was talking about was the revelation that he was the Son of God. That was the rock in which his church was going to be. His church was going to be built on, and on that word of Jesus being the Son of the living God, that hell would not prevail over the church. And so the tradition of Peter being the first Roman Catholic Pope is not true. And so in the 4th century, you had the 5 patriarchs of the 5 centers of the early church. You had Rome, you had Constantinople, you had Antioch, you had Jerusalem, and you had Alexandria. In 395 AD, after the division of the empire, Antioch, Jerusalem, and Alexander all acknowledged the leadership of Constantinople. Subsequently, the struggles between Constantinople and Rome began. Cyrus, Bishop of Rome, in his lust for worldly power, claimed universal jurisdiction over the church. Unfortunately for him, the empire got divided into two separate empires, the East and the West. The East was beset with controversies, and the West was breaking apart due to weak empires before the barbarians. We come to Pope Leo I. In 445, he obtained from Emperor Valentinian III imperial recognition for his claim as primate of all bishops. In 452, he persuaded Attila the Hun to spare the city of Rome. In 455, he included the Genseric the Van. He induced Genseric the Vandal to have mercy on the city. He claimed himself lord of the whole church, advocated for exclusive universal papacy, proclaimed that the resistance to his authority as sure as is a sure path to hell. He advocated for the death penalty for heresy. And then we go to the first Pope, Pope Gregory. My mistake. Pope Leo was bishop, then the first Pope, Pope Gregory, who he labored unceasingly over the purification of the church. Now you see a complete juxtaposition. He deposed neglectful or unworthy bishops. He opposed the sale of the office. Then we come to Charlemagne. Zacharias, an instrument in making Pepin king of Frank. Stephen II requested that Pepin led his army to Egypt and conquer the Lombards, which had pillaged Italy. He succeeded and gave a large part of central Italy to the Pope. That was the beginning of the Papal States, a temporal dominion which continued for 1,100 years until King Victor Emmanuel returned these lands to the Kingdom of Italy in 1870. Pepin's son was Charlemagne, one of the greatest rulers of all time. He reigned for 46 years with many wars and conquests and vast magnitude. His realm included what we know now as Germany, France, Switzerland, Austria, Hungary, Belgium, and some parts of Spain and some parts of Italy. He helped the Pope, and the Pope helped him. He was one of the greatest influences in bringing the papacy to the position of power. We have the Treaty of Verdun. After the death of Charlemagne, the Treaty of Verdun in 1843 divided the empire into what became the foundations of Germany, France, and Italy. A ceaseless struggle between the popes and the German and French kings began, and the Holy Roman Empire lasted 1,000 years until Napoleon brought it to an end in 1806. Now, if you go to Hitler, Hitler's Germany was called the Third Reich, which was a reflection of the First Reich, which was the Roman Empire, and then the Second Reich, which was the Holy Roman Empire, and then he was to bring in the Third Reich. The Isidorium Decretos. Nicholas I, 1858 to 858 to 867, was the first pope to wear a crown. Moreover, it was about this time the book appeared, the Isidorian Decretos, which propagated to be letters and degrees from bishops and councils of the 2nd and 3rd centuries. They were designed to exalt the power of the Pope, stamping the papacy with authority or with authority of antiquity, antedating the Pope's temporal power by 5 centuries. We have the Great Cleavage, and not what you're thinking. Until 869, all ecumenical councils had been held in Constantinople and in the Greek language. Nicholas undertook to interfere in the affair of the Eastern Church. He excommunicated Photius, Patriarch of Constantinople, who in turn excommunicated him. So now there's this big issue with the East and the West, where normally things would take place in the East and in Greek, but Nicholas, seeking to get papal power, was wanted everything to be done in Rome, and so he excommunicated the Patriarch of Constantinople, and in turn the Patriarch of Constantinople excommunicated Pope Nicholas. And so, because they excommunicated each other, the East finally separated themselves from the West forever. And this is now what we call the Eastern Orthodox Church. And so now the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church separated themselves from each other. This breach became wider throughout the centuries. The brutal treatment of Constantinople by the armies of Pope Innocent II during the Crusades and the creation of the dogma of papal infallibility in 1870 deepened the chasm between them more. So then you have the period that is called the Rule of the Harlots that lasted from 1904 to 1963, and then the descent continues from Pope Benedict VII to Pope Clement II from 1012 to 1047 AD. And then you have the golden age of papal power, where you have Leo the Ninth, Victor II, Stephen the Ninth, Nicholas II, Alexander II, Gregory the Seventh. And then we have Pope Innocent III, who was the most powerful of all the popes. His reign lasted from 1192 to 1216. He was the greatest of 1198 to 1216. He was the greatest of all the popes. He claimed to be the vicar of Christ, which is the replacement of Christ or the representative of Christ. He claimed to have sovereign authority over the church and the world. All the monarchs of Europe obeyed him, including the Byzantine Empire. He ordered 2 crusades. He decreed substantiation. So he decreed I hate this word. Transubstantiation is Jesus during the Last Supper got the emblems and told them that these were representations of him, whereas with the Catholic Eucharist, Jesus' physical body and his physical blood come into the emblems, and they're no longer symbolic, but they are actual things. It's actually him. And this actually has pagan roots in it, because it was said that if you are to eat the flesh of a god and drink the blood of a god, you are going to get power. And so Innocent then enforced this, or he's the one who decreed it rather. He confirmed auricular confessions. That's where you go to the Pope and tell them your sins. He decreed papal infallibility, saying that he's literally the representation of Christ on earth. He commanded the Magna Carta. He forbade reading the Bible in vernacular. At this point, the Bible was translated into Latin and was only allowed to be read by the priests. So whatever the priest told you, that's what you knew about the Bible. And he instituted the Inquisition. Now, going back to Naboth, keep this in mind. The Inquisition is called the Holy Office. The Inquisition was instituted by Pope Innocent III and was perfected by Pope Gregory IX. Everyone was required to inform against heretics. Furthermore, anyone suspected was liable to torture without knowing who his accusers were. Going back to Naboth, you realize that Naboth did not know who accused him. In fact, the Bible also doesn't even record, it says the sons of Belial. But Naboth did not know who accused him of blaspheming God. Now look at the juxtaposition. You realize that they're being tried against heresy. And it's heresy against God, heresy against the Pope, heresy against the church. Naboth was accused of heresy against God and the king. So the accuser didn't know the accuser did not know who the person who was accused, they don't know who his accusers were. The proceedings were done in secret, just like Naboth. Moreover, the inquisitor pronounced a sentence, and the victim was turned to civil authorities to be imprisoned for life or to be burnt, just like Naboth was Naboth's life was put on the line for the vineyard that he refused to give to Ahab. The victim's property was confiscated and divided between the church and the state, just like Naboth's vineyard going to the state, which was King Ahab. The Inquisition claimed vast majority of victims in Spain, Italy, and in the Netherlands, and it was the most deadly work. And its most deadly work was done against the Albigenses. The Albigenses, or the Carthan, preached against the immortality of the priesthood. Sorry, the immoralities of the priesthood. Obviously, even today, you still find that the Vatican has problems with, especially pedophilia. The worship of saints and images, again, you can still see it today in the Catholic Church, where you have the Pope who is able to forgive sins, and where you have them praying to graven images of Jesus, of Mary, even pictures of Jesus and of Mary. The clergy and their claims, the claims of the Church of Rome, they made great use of scripture and lived self-denying lives with a great zeal for moral purity. Furthermore, by 1167, a majority of the population of southern France were very numerous. Furthermore, by 1167, a majority of the population of southern France, and they were also very numerous in northern Italy. So a majority of them were in southern France and northern Italy. Unfortunately, in 1208, Pope Innocent III ordered a bloody war of their extermination, which utterly wiped them out, town after town, until all the Albigenses were utterly wiped out. The Waldenses, a similar but not identical group in the same region, with emphasis on church reading and rejecting clerical usurpation, and profligacy were wiped out. Moreover, the 30 years between 1540 and 1570, no fewer than 900 Protestants were put to death by the Pope's wars for extermination of the Waldenses. For 500 years, the Inquisition was the most diabolical thing in human history. Next time we come, we're going to talk about a coal miner named Martin Luther. But with that was the Church of Thyatira, which had a very, very, very grim end.